Although perhaps Vine can tell us when it is in fact up and running.
On the actually on that note, let's ask him to check on the 2M restraint. Because it's the 2MK channel directly, so it doesn't matter.
Yes, it is. Vine says we're live. We're good to go. So the rabbit can catch up when he is ready.
Very well. So on that note, good evening everyone. We are doing a special form of open mic today. As usual, we are reviewing the matches of our compatriot The Wolf, an Alex player, sometimes an Akali player. Today we'll only be reviewing Alex matches, but we're starting with some matches he had against me the other day for some practice, and I want to frame exactly what came up as a result of that and how we're going to be showing his progression in this particular set of matches. Over the last couple of days, he has put more effort into ranked, feeling more comfortable about his ability to actually keep up with most opponents and rank up. And it did work well, but part of it was because of a concept that I need to explain to people who are feeling bad about going up or down in ranks relatively heavily on the swing. This is the concept of character buoyancy, which is the title of the stream today. This is about when you are playing a character who either has a problem dealing with many different characters and therefore ends up losing as much points as you gain, or when you have a particular set of matchup experience that only lends itself to one character. This will be shown as we go on, so let's start today from the first of the matches that he had with me that we intended to touch on. He had many matches in general, but in the interest of time, we're only going to look at the last 5 because this is where most of the things that came about and that therefore needed a discussion in terms of matchup knowledge, these are where they all came together more or less. So let's move on to that match.
Okay.
So the primary thing to understand is that he does not have much Colleen experience other than fighting me directly. And that doesn't happen too often because, as viewers know, I spend more time doing analysis and helping others improve at the game than playing myself. But this was a specific set in which I was purposely avoiding doing her vanity step because he wanted to work on punishes, and that can be difficult to keep track of. And in addition to that, I was not using my correct button configuration. I can do this a lot, and you can do this against your friends. Switch a punch and a kick, any punch and a kick that you use often, and it will affect how you end up playing the game.
That's an interesting handicap method. Alright. So he's starting to stay back a bit, and his usual tending to block things. He seems a little bit intimidated by your icicles, but... Ooh, very nice counter there.
The problem with that counter was actually that he fell for it a lot. There was a particular setup that I could consistently hit counter after and always get away with it. And I don't think he picked up on it at the time.
I see, yes, it can be difficult to come up with those directly when you're actually in the middle of a match. Although it's definitely a skill you need to gather.
You can see it here where every time I do the stand heavy kick after a throw, well, the sniping kick, sorry, I will wait a very, very short time and then hit it.
Okay. The sniping kick is the, which one now?
The crouch counter one that you just basically seen.
That then. Got it. He managed to block the on the ground. I think he was having trouble with that before, or was that not him?
That's more so the way that the flow goes.
Alright.
It's not that he can't block. It's more so something else. So he was working on punishing the V skill and having some trouble.
I see. I actually don't see him making attempts at punishing it. On the other hand, no, there was an opportunity. I suppose it's partly that he's getting caught in it.
Well, any new thing to practice can take a little while to get used to, and you can't just decide I'm going to mash this button or mash this other button.
That's definitely true. Although the dashing up to you or walking up to you and just standing there, I understand his fear of the counter, but it certainly gives a lot of power to Colleen if you do. Oh dear lord.
The problem with that is that he also mentioned that he wanted to practice his power bomb, but did not seem to connect the fact that I was playing Colleen, who cannot counter it, basically, with the idea of I should dash up and use power bomb. But I told him beforehand that I was not going to use the vanity step because that is the easiest way to avoid someone dashing up on you with Colleen. You don't think too much about it, you just get out of the way.
I see. Yes, so that would actually be a rather notable handicap because you don't have... You would just have to jump back at that point, I suppose, or but try and backdash for it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
so the match above that, the match above that was more or less more of the same. There was a lot more flow on his side toward punishing, but I also limited some of the stuff I was doing. As you saw in the last match, I threw out more hailstorms to see if he would defend the hailstorms correctly, which he mostly did, but it got a little iffy. So you're going to see a couple changes in this match. So let's move on to that and look into what that caused overall. The main thing is, once I'm against Alex and I throw tech, I'm almost certainly going to do that, especially if I throw tech from a defensive position where we were jostling for a position and I know he doesn't have charge. Throw tech is not enough time to get a charge, and therefore I might as well hit V-skill.
I see.
After the sniping kick, I know that I'm out of range of his crouch medium kick, but that he will probably still hit it out of just generally doing that as a response to people poking.
I see. When you're out of range of it, is it just a whiff punish that it becomes then?
No.
Or is it, can you actually parry it or such?
She actually parries it.
Ah.
That.
Aha. Is it just that your parry's, I don't know what to call it, box. Your parry box is a little farther out.
It's not how this crouch medium kick is 10 frames.
Well, there's, okay. You can almost parry that.
It might be 9,
well, not on
but
reaction,
no, I'm pretty sure that they're ready at the moment, and it is just 10 frames.
Okay, then.
I'm pretty sure Tool Assisted is fully up to date right now. So, no, you can't really do it on reaction, but it's easy to set up characters with slower normals who are used to being able to hit something just because the opponent can't hit anything quite in time that will reach.
I see, yes. It's very easy to take advantage of bad habits, and especially given they are habits that have not necessarily been challenged, you can end up with, well, basically it can be very hard to change them, or necessarily realize to some degree what even is happening if they're sufficiently autopilot. That was a very nice head crush there, though.
But unfortunately, it was still more so my mistake.
I see. In what way? Oh. Oh, that hurt.
The hit afterward, there wasn't a reason to hit the V-skill right there. But since I adapted to that fairly quickly, it stops happening, basically.
Okay. I can see he keeps trying it, although I take it you're probably ready for the matter by now?
Well, that's the problem. If you don't move, if you do certain things with Colleen and the head crush comes early, she just moves out of the way. She's basically literally unhittable.
I see, that makes it a somewhat useless seeming move for him. Is there just a better time for it, or is it just not one of his tools for Colleen?
No, it's not a tool in this matchup. It's basically not a tool in this matchup. Colleen is so unafraid of it that almost everything she does moves her out of the way completely. So you just don't use it ever. There's probably some situation that you set up, but see, even like, if you try it after and she goes into sweep, you'll miss. I'm pretty sure that that is a real evasion method.
Yes, it looks like he got it once and he's trying to figure out if he can continue to do it, but really is not getting any chance whatsoever. So he's moved back to poking you a little bit now. Only to get parried, it seems.
You can see the main effect of the handicap here in that it takes a lot more mental energy to do her stuff correctly when your medium punches are switched with your medium kicks, because your muscle memory for her main jump-in combos is gone.
Uh-huh. Yes, I suppose that would be a problem. Just imagining it. It seems also like it would... well, I've done that in the past to myself, back when I was... I have on occasion lost my button config, but because it was all muscle memory, I didn't, honest to God, had no idea whether my heavy punches were on top or my heavy kicks were on top. And so I've gotten that backwards at times, and it's kind of an interesting experience. But it seems like something that would get you tired a lot quicker too, though. In terms of
that's sort of
the execution type stamina.
You'll be able to see that in the next match, which is the one above it directly. We're not skipping any of these.
Okay.
Overall, it's more so that when you have the buttons switched around like that, and let's move on to the next match while I talk about that.
Okay.
When you have the buttons switched around in that way, you are aware of how to do the thing, especially if it's buttons that are the second hit of your jump-ins or something. Like you jump in with heavy, but you know that the next button you have to hit is a medium. You can mentally tell yourself, okay, I'm ready to hit the correct medium. But if your opponent has managed to keep up with you or make you think about other things, then
you lose that
difficult.
tracking. I see. So it's an automatic damage nerf in a way.
It's not so much. It's a clean way to give them an advantage for playing well, because
I see.
Your own distraction prevents you from being able to confirm your combos.
I see. Or alternately may make you play a little less well yourself, depending. Alright, looks like he's still at those head crushes. And appears to be using more or less one particular poke string.
Well, that is the standard Alex poke string, which is kind of the problem.
But if he only has one, it lends itself to a command counter from Colleen very easily.
Not quite, because Colleen would have to then learn the exact timing for that counter, which can be rather hard.
I see. So that would be more so something that would happen at higher levels, at which point you would probably have more options anyway, or so one would hope. Alright then.
Plus, his crouch medium kick, once he goes into the crouch medium kick, there's not a lot of things you can do. Either you parried it immediately in time, which is difficult, unless you're using her ES low parry, or you've been hit by it and now you're waiting for the head crush, which can't be countered anyway. But by hitting the skill, it stops him from doing any move because he can't cancel the crouch medium kick very well. As far as I remember, he can't do it at all.
I see.
So that happens, and I will continually get out of the way of that. It works for basically anything, actually. She just has a specific perfect way of moving forward that also would stop most of his attacks. So he has to...
That would be the vanity step, then?
No, that's the V skill.
Okay.
She can, after being hit by the crouch medium kick, or blocking the crouch medium kick, most of the time she can just V skill. Because Alex has pushed her to a range where the V skill, while not quite safe, has become hard to punish. The good thing is that it's not hard to punish for Alex, if your timing is on point.
I see.
And that was the key to note. The key to note was, I can in fact get away from this. I can in fact get hit by this and then punish it because it's -7. But to be unaware of that is very difficult for you.
Okay.
But his muscle memory is to do the crouch medium kick and then go into the head crush. And
I see.
This will always miss. I can just hit that all the time. In fact,
I see.
there are many characters who have options that are very similar to that.
Sure, I know, Ibuki has moves that has, like, I think her crouch. Heavy Punch will, like, low profile all sorts of cross-up madness. And I seem to think Cammy has something as well, although I'm not sure of that. So I have a question, actually. Was this something that were you discussing things with him during these matchups, such that, like, you could point out that the head crush was not going to work at all?
Well, that was a different matter, and more so something personal to him, where he didn't actually ask me anything, but we were not speaking over PS Party or anything like that. So that's a
Okay.
different part of the situation.
Fair enough, then.
But I had decided specifically not to say anything on my own, because he said at the beginning, I'm going to work on punishes, and the final result was, okay, I'm going to trust that eventually you will get the punishes down, because you have to learn at some point to recognize the situation you're in and know which button to hit to punish.
I see.
You can only go so far with other people telling you how to punish every move.
This is definitely a fair point, yes. Anyway, let's see
But
here.
as you can see, the combination of the things happening here is not in his favor, because whether he hits with the crouch medium kick or not, Colleen doesn't care, she gets out of the way of the follow-up. If he doesn't punish the V-skill which gets her out of the way, then he's basically at her mercy again for a short time.
Yes.
And on top of that, she just keeps on throwing him more and more.
Uh-huh. Did something odd happen there that V-skill, that V-trigger did not on the ground him?
The timing is actually relatively difficult
I see.
if you haven't practiced in a while,
Okay.
because the timing is slightly different for each of her knockdowns. And sometimes I get confused between the regular throw one and the other one that I managed to use more often.
I see. Okay, then.
Also, I believe, although I'm not absolutely sure, that your opponent actually has some control over it, in that there is probably a 1 or 2 frame difference in when you can do it against someone who quick rises versus someone who doesn't. There's a frame you can do it on where it will definitely hit both, but I'm not absolutely certain as of yet. And
I
haven't
would
been able
not
to
have
find
expected.
anything online.
I would not have expected the back roll timing to be any much different than the quick rise timing, but I suppose there could be some detail there.
Well, there is no back roll timing in this case,
well.
as it is.
Oh, okay. I see. Right. Okay then.
So,
well, in that case.
yes, let's move on to the next match.
Okay then.
In this case, though, those factors combine into a very heavily difficult and extremely stressful time for him, because it basically led to the feeling of there's absolutely nothing I can do. Colleen is not even using all of her tools, and yet Alex seems to be able to do absolutely nothing to her.
I have gotten myself into that mindset position and from time to time in certain cases, and it really is a miserable place to be. Especially since it's not something that tends to change, given a specific opponent who has certain patterns. At least not until you figure out the one thing that you do need to do. Or where the timing is off in your mindset. He seems to be whiffing his command throw, apparently, then. Is that something you're doing, or is that simply his own timing or positioning?
That is a mixture of both things.
Okay. I remember him at one point having trouble where he was tick throwing, but the frames didn't come out quite right as well, and foiling himself. So
Well, the first point is that Alex's command grab is terrible.
Ah, it is. Alright then. I wasn't sure. It's just range-wise, I presume, and startup a bit?
Range-wise.
Okay.
Range-wise? No, startup's the same. Range is terrible.
I see. It does seem so, because he was not very far away from you when he attempted it. Huh. What is the move he just did called? The one where he knees into the air to try and catch you and slam you down?
Air knee smash, thankfully.
Okay. Ah, convenient. Good. I think I could remember that. His air knee smash seems to not really be helping him. Do you know what he was trying to catch there with it?
That mostly. There's a neutral jump setup that I have for it.
I see.
Part of the reason for the way this match goes is that after a while, he did, as I said, get to that feeling of there's really nothing I can do at all, and started to rely a lot more on motion than on punishes.
I see.
Now, this works if you are attempting to bait me into something, but he does it a
Sure.
little bit. The way he does it is easy for me to recognize, so I ended up basically not paying attention to it.
I see.
I said, well, okay, I will throw ice at you instead,
Indeed.
whereas I wasn't really doing that a lot before.
Sure, and then that just feeds back into his feeling, unfortunately, because now he's taking damage from his correction, and... Is this going to kill? No. Okay. That might have been at least a little good for morale. But I see
Unfortunately,
no
I would think
guarantees he's
not.
going to win this. No? Alright.
It's kind of a bad situation to be in when your main way of punishing people or of
I see.
dealing a lot of damage revolves around landing your super. It's
Yes,
good
this
for
is
you when you're
fair.
at low levels, but after that it becomes difficult for you.
Yes. Because you only get that once per round at best. And not necessarily even then. Oddly, that's something I found myself. I was very good at low levels and sort of lost the ability as I moved up. Possibly because my opponents just are a little better at handling things. In any case, still trying with that air knee smash. Not managing to do it on reaction to the jump, however. I'm a little surprised, actually, that the when you get in on him, one of his reactions is not to command throw.
Because again, the range is relatively terrible. And
Right.
it's easy to counter hit it if you know what you're doing.
I see. I
Plus,
had the...
I am being random enough where I just like hit buttons,
Okay, so he's probably afraid of that
even
then.
sweep.
That's understandable, I suppose. But,
Because as noted, he said
Yeah.
he wanted to work on punishes, so
And Colleen is an interesting character to try and punish because she can do sniping kick counter immediately and get your medium kick. So you actually need, I suppose, a variety of punish options, or at least two, so that it becomes a mix-up rather than a full failure case. Because I don't think you can really delay it there. Well, I suppose you could. There's recovery on that, the counter, if it whiffs. So the alternative would be to hit, to block, delay, and then counter hit the, or rather, punish the counter. But that becomes entirely Colleen specific and still probably somewhat hard to do.
also
Especially
let's
since it's
forget
just
that
very...
just randomly sniping you, kicking you on every wake up, which is something I assure you that Colleen players are very happy to get away with.
I would not be surprised by this. In any case.
Yes, so once again, let's move on to the last of these matches, and then I'll explain what
Okay.
I meant about character buoyancy and what this meant later.
Sure, as we begin to go
But
into his
on
ranked
that-
matches after the point, I suppose.
So the main final point that made it clear that he was unlikely to get anything more out of fighting me is something that, again, wasn't necessarily known to him at the time, but as I mentioned before, I kept on using sweep there, and this is again connected to how you handicap yourself to work with someone who is trying to get up to your level. Because I can't hit my medium kick in neutral with the same muscle memory, my medium kick is
Sure.
+1. my sweep is minus 12. The difference between these moves is so vast, except that the range is not particularly so. The medium kick is just not cancelable. So what
I
I'm
see.
doing in
Are you
the
just
match
subbing
here
that
is
in then?
yes, which means that I'm also not even attempting to get the combo off of the sweep.
I
As he
see.
requested to do more punishes, the crush counter is nice. It gets me up to be trigger faster, and I got to practice that, and I'm thankful. But the idea being, the sweep is something he probably should learn to punish,
Yes.
because lower level Kalines will just hit sweep.
Indeed. I used to think that it was not punishable, but it definitely is if you're ready for it and used to it. So it seems like it's almost one of the easier punishes to learn. Especially since it's an extremely minus move. It won't be a case of just minus a little bit where you're going to get countered right away for it.
She can in fact space it against some people because they must use a longer and slower button to do it, which means that their own reaction comes into it a lot. But this is precisely how you would build up those reactions, by having someone switch their buttons and sweep far more than they ever should.
Indeed. And DeWolf here in chat indicates that he was using the medium air knee smash to escape some pressure when in a bad position. Which seems a little odd to me, but I suppose I would have to watch it more.
It was possibly working, but how one applies pressure with Colleen is not a real thing that other people can say, okay, I'll use this button to deal with it.
Sure. Because in part Colleen's pressure is going to be...
That is precisely what I referred to, and what happens when I sometimes fight you as well. I've told you before that there comes a point in matches where you have become relatively ineffective at a particular goal.
Yes.
And switch to another goal, even though that is not what your training partner is trying to help you learn. So
yes, and then that just sort of ruins the whole thing.
Right, you're winning more, but you're not gaining anything anymore. At least you're not gaining anything relative to your original goal.
Right, and it ends up being somewhat more of a waste of time, because if you wanted to switch goals directly and you communicated properly about this, your training partner could obviously help you with the other goal, which might be useful in some cases, at least to cycle the frustration around some. Unfortunately,
if you don't do this clearly, what happens is that you start to beat them because they're trying to help with your old goal, and you're countering the goal rather than learning anything from it.
Exactly, and then you're wasting your own time and theirs. Because learning to beat someone who's helping you learn a specific different thing is not going to help you in any real matches.
We are going to look at the Colleen matches later, because I didn't get around to telling him all of this before he actually had another one. And,
I see.
It will definitely be interesting to see what turns out, because obviously I'm doing the same things over and over again and not using all of Colleen's abilities. I haven't watched that match, so we're going to be basically doing it live.
Okay.
But, yeah. So,
well,
in this concept, we have a character buoyancy as an idea, which is basically that different characters in this game have different levels to which you can get to them to in points based on what other characters they're good at beating. If your character is good at beating Shotos, it's unlikely that you'll be in anything lower than silver for most of your time playing.
Sure, because you'll simply float up by the numbers.
Yes. The same thing happens if you have a lot of experience fighting Shotos and know all the technology for your character versus that type of character. So what we're going to leave, you can skip over the Kareen matches that follow this, and you can skip the entire section in which he fights against Suntier, because that was just switching over to who was doing the teaching and who was doing the helping. So,
alright, so we're looking at the Kill Pop 901 match immediately. Or we were skipping the Kareen, you said.
Yes, we're skipping the Kareen. The Kareen is not actually a Kareen player. If you check it, they're actually level 0 Kareen. And
I see.
Were there for some reason. And you can also skip the Kami, I believe, that came afterwards, they were
There's a
not
Zangief after
terrible.
that, actually. Cammy is one
Right,
up
the
more.
Zangief, and skip that as well, and we're going straight to, I believe, Angry Black Man.
Alright, I'm ready for it then.
Okay, so let's move on to that.
Okay.
And obviously, he has a lot of experience fighting Ryu. He can fight Amara at basically any time that they can align their schedules, which isn't too hard to schedule. And he fights tons of Ryu online. So here we have a level 11 Ryu.
I see.
And the thing that made me think the most about this match was this person downloaded him really fast. You can literally watch it happen in real time.
Interesting.
So
well, that will be nice to watch.
I'm gonna let you commentate this primarily and think of it in that respect.
Alright.
Because it happens really fast.
Well, let's see what we can see. Starting off with some elbows and poking. Getting a few Shoryukens punished here. More so when he was expecting him to use slightly longer range buttons. Done with the Shoryukens. Good point anti-airs there. There, now they're back. Yeah, he's definitely adapted to the poking patterns and jump-ins, and is just ready to go with those block and punish. Or anti-airs. That was remarkably quick, yes. So now DeWolf is going to have to come up with something new. And we're going to find out if he does in this next round. Because as it stands, it will be very short. The early Shoryuken is interesting, expecting some other opening gambit. I'm not sure if Alex actually has anything that will punish that if he didn't use something to hit it. Trying to jump in from a little bit farther. Our friendly neighborhood Ryu is, or perhaps unfriendly, depending on his anger levels, is starting to use the fireballs a bit and trying to jump in on him just to close the range and take away his control. However, the getting in is really not working out for him, nor are the Tatsus, which is a little interesting, so we'll have to see how he adapts to that.
Yes, he basically gives up on the Tatsus really fast because he recognizes that the timing he expects Alex to move in, like that is a known way to deal with Alex, to Tatsu in neutral. But he's like, oh, you're not moving at all, so I should just not do that at all.
I see. And now he's ready with the anti-airs. He seems to be done with the Tatsus entirely, and is working on more of a poke and block setup since DeWolf is moving a little bit less. Still on top of the punishes. Yep. Primarily subsisting off of punishes. A very nice Shinku punish there. He is not needing a whole lot more since DeWolf is not managing to bait or control him in any obvious way. And most of his movements are not calibrated such that Ryu is having any trouble with them. So we do see another layer of adaptation attempted, and just gone very quickly there again. So now I'm curious if there are, presumably there are only 2 of these matches, but if there are 3...
that's what's interesting about it.
Really? Huh.
It was more interesting because there were 3 of them, but you will quickly understand why I say that he got downloaded super fast. Because...
Can you still hear me? I dropped my...
Yes, I can still hear you.
Okay, good. Well then, I am ready for the next one.
So yes, let's move on to that, but the main thing that you have to note is 3 things he did in that match. The first was, whenever the wolf got too far away from him, he stayed still. Because he was trying to test whether or not the wolf would ever do anything other than slash elbow. Which, for the most part, he didn't. So all he did ever at that point was wait it out. After a certain block string, he would try to jump with medium punch, to the point where he did this preemptively on occasion.
I see.
And then he had the tick throw when he was close. So he has 3 things he understands about this match at the moment. Jump in and do tick throw, wait when he's very far away, and at a very specific block string, do the jumping medium punch thing.
Alright, so far so good.
Now.
And apparently DeWolf will close this one out, so let's see how that goes. We have some of the jumping in there. And he's landing somewhat in front of him, but not necessarily enough to get hit by anything but his longer buttons. Backing off a little bit, timing only is the issue there. I was expecting him to not necessarily get hit by that slash elbow, especially since it hits high, or mid rather. Ah, there's the Tatsu straight through. Little interesting. Still jumping in. Throw punish. So he seems to have adapted his jumping into a sort of option select based on whether it's air to airing or not. Which is definitely still successful even though he hasn't seen an air to air very recently.
The main thing that happens is that he starts to get his ranges wrong. And it's really important for players to recognize when your opponent has actually countered you and when you're getting your ranges wrong.
I see.
The take throw did get countered. So he's got 3 situations now, and all of his situations turned back upon him without any change from DeWolf. DeWolf did not do anything different.
It's just because he's positioning himself.
Yeah, Angry Black Man did something different and failed his own spacing multiple times. But the situations he was facing were not different.
I get the impression that he perhaps got himself a little more aggressive or a little more confident and tried to move faster somewhat, and that didn't work out for him.
Right. That is, I would say, a heavy part of this. So he now starts to, in the third round, he basically starts to go for, okay, wait, this is not quite working out for me, and I don't want to lose, so let me just do some damage. But that is where the Wolf excels. He excels in stopping you from doing such damage.
Right. So what Angry here actually needed to do was slow himself down a little and just breathe a little more. Ooh, very interesting EX Tatsu there, getting himself hurt both times. Expecting aggression from DeWolf, I think more so than he's necessarily been given to justify with what he's seen. Or at least I don't expect it to be a part of his usual patterns from DeWolf there. It's not perhaps because he was taking damage and then it became feeling like he was taking damage and then it became, oh well, do I need to be a little more defensive or similar?
I'm not really sure. There's no way to tell what made that happen in the way it did.
Unfortunate.
The specific thing I would say is
I have loaded up the next match early, unfortunately, just due to muscle memory.
Alright.
So I will await you at the start point.
No need.
Okay.
At this point, again, it's mostly just your commentary, so anything I say is going to be overarching sort of stuff.
Alright, I won't worry about it then in this case.
Basic idea is, when I say that someone's downloaded, I don't necessarily mean that they won.
Sure, because there's all sorts of things. Execution and such.
If you went through a much longer set with them, though, they'd probably start to terribly beat you.
Yes. Because they'd have time to calibrate their responses. So now here we are, and Angry Black Man seems to be making his comeback a little bit. Very on-point jump-ins. I think he's back to his original Shoryuken. Dual jump-in there did not get DeWolf any favors. Hit by the Shoryuken. Takes the throw. Everything that was working before is working again. Angry Black Man seems to be on point with his spacing, or returned basically to his prior game. Nice long-range heavy kicks there for the jump-ins. No response from DeWolf. Not necessarily that there was one to have. Solid Shoryukens. One Air Stampede, but overall this is seeming to go alright for Angry Black Man relative to how things were before. Losing a little bit of power, or, well, you can go ahead.
Basically, that round failed entirely on not cancelling out of that jumping BB punch.
So, yes, and he, well, either way. So when the Tatsu is back, but the tick throws and the jump-ins are the same. We have a parry, but no follow-up. The CA was not blocked. Alright then. Blackman is going to take a lot of damage here. Bringing them down a little bit better than even from DeWolf's side. Dwarf is being very aggressive with his poke zoning a little bit here. V-trigger response gets... Ooh, that is not a meaty. Unfortunate with the V-skill there. The tension does not close it out. But he can just wait for that parry because Dwarf did not choose to fully charge it for the guard break.
Mm-hmm.
And now he's back to his anti-airing practice.
Understanding what your opponent is going to do generally just doesn't mean that you can actually do it.
Yes. You may not know the response, or you may not have the exact timing or spacing figured out. It can take a certain amount of practice just to be able to do what you know needs to be done. Or possibly figure out his exact details. Another CA. Trade anti-air there, looking very good for DeWolf, although we do know the eventual outcome, I believe? No, okay. Angry Black Man does take it in the end, simply because... I suppose he is not quite as experienced enough in this match, this specific match, as he otherwise could be.
And that is, again, the issue of character buoyancy. If you're playing the Alex and facing like 10 Ryus a day, then your chances of beating a Ryu are far higher than the Ryu's chances of beating you at the same level, simply because you get more practice. It is easier. Part of the reason why you get an army of Ryu at lower levels is because the army itself makes it harder for people who join said army to actually have success. But we're going up now all the way up to the Balrog player, actually. We're skipping all of the Ryu in there, but I will note that most of those matches were won and his rank points either stayed very high or got very high within that block space right there.
Alright, and his rank points now appear to actually be 1587, so they definitely did go up some.
Right, because he basically beat a bunch of Ryu.
Sure. And now he has to learn how to deal with a Balrog. Not something you see very often online.
But this is like a level 40 Balrog, so let's move on to that and see what you can... See what we can glean from the difference between how he is probably handling Ryu players and what he has to do in order to beat Balrog players.
Alright then.
Note that he does have some experience in this matchup from other friends, but probably not as much as Ryu, obviously.
It's hard to have as much matchup experience as online Ryus, as against online Ryus. Alright, so some of that head crush jump in, not doing very good with the ranges there. Balrog is a little bit defensive, a little bit cautious, doing mostly safe-ish poke strings, waiting it out. And DeWolf is not giving him any reason to do anything else, with his jump-in's very nice backdash into punish for the head crush. Some EX damage. Jump-ins are working out for DeWolf so far, but a good anti-air gets him back out of the corner. And now it is Balrog in control of the spacing here. The throw takes it out at the end of the round. So it seems like he's
The bigger problem with this was simply that most of his damage did come from jump-ins, and this isn't to say that the Balrog player dealt with it, but he was too interested in getting tap to work against a character who is hard to land tap on.
Alright. Well, the Balrog also appears to have much more control of the space here or spacing and positioning than DeWolf does. DeWolf is trying to poke him out and, as you say, just get him with the... I suppose that's a air stampede, but jump in or air stampede are not overall aerial attacks, but on a somewhat regular pattern, although there is a little bit of variance within it.
So as you'll note, the Balrog's player's tendency to try tap a lot is probably the thing that causes them the most trouble. If you watch where their health disappears, or where the situation shifts in DeWolf's favor, it's almost always because they were doing something else instead and tap happened, and they whiffed it,
I
and
see.
then things went poorly from there.
Do you think that he's probably just learning his tap still and using this opportunity to practice it?
That's partly it, but it's actually that tap is harder to use against opponents who are very jumpy. And Alex, since parts of his moves are actually jumps,
I see.
it becomes harder to target him with them.
Oh, you mean in his normals as well they have airborne frames involved? Or are you referring more to his stampedes and
No,
head crushes and all of
I'm
that?
referring to Stampede and Crush.
Alright then.
The idea being that most people, and of course we're watching all of these so you can move up to the next, most people can't jump in response to tap and not get hit. Most people also won't be doing a move that takes them into the air and out of tap at the time. It's basically only Bison and Alex that actually do a move that is meant to attack you and will be out of range of tap at the time. I think
see.
even Demon Flip in certain spacings will get caught in it sometimes.
Aha. Well then.
And in order to basically show that even better, let's move on to the next match.
Okay.
Because I do remember watching some of this, and it was really that sort of feeling of me wanting to tell the Balrog player, stop doing that! And it wasn't necessarily even that they did it a lot. It's that every time they did it, well, not every time, because I might be remembering this match and the third match they had. I might be mixing up the two of them, but we'll see in a moment.
Well, we will indeed find out in just one moment here then.
There's no escape. Okay, let's rumble. Round one. Fight.
Okay then. Starting off with the elbow, we have some of the similar space control. DeWolf is jumping in a lot more using a longer range button for it rather than his air stampedes. But still definitely going with the aerial stuff, which as you were noting is messing up tap, although we've not seen that specifically, I don't think. Getting the air to airs though, now that he's decided to use that, it looks like. Oof. V-trigger activation, but it did not get him out of the... And head crush takes the end. Good for the shenanigan mix-up, though.
It's very good once you've got Balrog cornered, because he doesn't respond as well as other characters to that.
Sure. And it's obviously harder to backdash or get out of the way in the corner, which I believe is one of the Balrog's primary responses to it in other situations. Starting to use that crush a little more heavily now, managing to get off a powerbomb. So let's see here. Punished on the second one, however. Air to air. Balrog holding back a little bit. Looks like he's now baiting out those aerial attacks so that he can get them. Oof, very nice there. With the V-trigger output. Another V-trigger full punish here. Takes a lot of health off. DeWolf is up with meter, however. Ooh. Spends one of it, no longer has CA. But manages to take out Sween in the end. Bringing us into another round.
Based on that, I'm pretty sure it's the last match that I was remembering, though he did... he might have caught my attention with it by... Basically, that started with a instant tap which got hit by a neutral jump heavy kick. And had DeWolf been ready, that would have been a massive amount of damage.
Alright then. So let's see here.
But, yes, let's move on to the next match.
Okay.
And we will see where this starts to turn around. Until this point, you could say that neither player was specifically trying to do anything to the other that was recognizably good or bad to most people. Because when you just end up trading a lot of damage, it's hard to tell until you go back and rewatch the match whether or not, oh, that was a stupid thing I did, I just happened to get away with it.
Sure. Alright then.
And that is also why buoyancy affects a lot of people, because they win a match and they don't think, wait, did I do anything stupid in that match? And they don't go back and check matches that they won for that.
Sure. Which leaves you with a lot of gaps that you may have otherwise if you go and find how you could have won better. Because you're certainly going to make the same amount of mistakes, more or less, in a winning matchup as a losing one, given an opponent. Lots of long-range poking from Dwarf here. Crutch fails, gets punished here. Balog's staying back now, trying almost to force him into the head crunches and air stampedes outright. Although Dwarf does have a little bit of meter he could use here. He is getting a lot of aerial damage. It's becoming very much a battle of moments, as you mentioned.
He adapted very well in the first round to Balrog attempting to move out of the way more, and he just changed up his jumping buttons and aerial approaches.
Mm-hmm. So let's see if that continues. Balrog is keeping a farther spacing now than he has been in the, at least first set. Still managing to get powerbound, however. Ooh, EX powerbound fails on Wake Up. Poor timing, I suppose? I don't know, but that was a little unfortunate there. Pushed back into the corner. Balrog has him now. Oh, switch sides, but it doesn't matter when he punches him directly away. Close to stun from Dwarf here, and low HP. Balrog with lots of space. Taking a little damage, but not enough. And just a few swings out. It takes the game. Alright. Last round, backing off, now making his own jump and attacks. Baited somewhat by the longer jump in range button. He's gotten a lot less up close aggressive and such, and even a little more cautious about his farther back stuff. Not getting as many punishes on Dwarf as he did originally. But Dwarf is also being a little bit more cautious, I would expect, with that. Is it the end? Yes, it is.
Right, as you know, he basically said, okay, I'm done. I'm not doing tap anymore. I'm not doing that anymore. I want to stand at the maximum range I can and just punch you. And it was, unfortunately, for Dwarf, really effective to just do that.
Yes, it did work out.
SF4 Dudley level of match. Just hit stand heavy punch until something goes white.
Good to know Duff City is still getting a few tourists this time of year. Alright then. Are we moving on to the Nash? Or are we considering forward a little ways?
Demon Necklord.
Demon Necklord, what a name.
But note the level of this Nash. So
2800, huh?
No, not the
Oh?
The actual level.
Oh, there it is.
Nash.
61. Alright then.
So let's move on to that and
okay.
Yeah. Now, the key to this match that made me really interested in what exactly Demon Necklord did, and why I think that they were also a heavy victim of character buoyancy, because if you didn't get Nash up high before, like, mid-season nerfs in Season 1, you had a hard time. Well, it wasn't even a mid-season nerf in that there were actually any nerfs, it was more so something to do with input delay and some other stuff that you'd have to understand, a lot of Capcom stuff to understand.
Well then, starting out with a zoning game. Dwarf managing to get that with not an elbow, but a flash chop, I believe it was there. Throws some heavy pressure from the Nash, definitely working on keeping him from having any time to breathe. Stun. Decent combo, but not extreme, and no meter wasted on it, so we are still in the game. Does not need the meter to close it out, however, in this case. Dwarf does not seem to be ready for his pressure very much.
And that's the interesting thing, because it's not so much the pressure. Because Dwarf is reacting to the cross-ups. He's doing something. In fact, what he is doing is technically one of the best things that Alex and Chun-Li can do. Merely just hold up back and let the cross-up hit you in a particular way.
Uh-huh. To reposition for the ground responses afterwards. Alright,
especially against Nash, who basically can't delay his next button after the cross-up. Is strong against characters who don't have that option. There's certain characters who basically, as soon as they've crossed you up, they have to hit a button immediately.
So they can't stop to determine what's happened?
It's really difficult to stop and determine what's happened.
I see.
In fact, I developed this technique in Chun-Li primarily because of fighting Nashes back then, and then had to realize later on, okay, this doesn't actually work on everyone. This works specifically on Nash, and to some extent
Alright,
Ken,
then.
but most Ken can figure out the way past it because Ken doesn't have to hit that button. Nash basically has to hit that button.
I see. Quick stun here on this end. Dwolf at very low health. Not going to close this out if I have anything to say about it here. Getting some good mileage with the parries, taking off half of Necklord. Dropkick. Oh, but the V-trigger puts him on the other side of the parry. No damage, no follow-up, no fireball, nothing. Taking him out
Actually,
again with a
wouldn't have made any
jab.
sense to.
Not even
Because
a
he can't control how
boom.
far that goes. He can't control how far that goes. The wolf actually can charge for a head crush or something while Sledgehammer is coming out.
Ah.
And
So he could take a head
anything that
crunch
does
immediately
happen,
after.
he could. And if
Alright.
he delayed it longer, he would take a head crush. If he didn't delay it longer, it could be parried.
I see.
But that is not what made this match stand out to me. The next one is what made this stand out to me. So let's move on to that.
Okay.
And the demonstration as to what exactly a Nash player does when they recognize, I don't have to do anything to you. You will kill yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And Nash is not actually a character who usually gets to play that game, because zoning is usually a lot of work. Normally you have to be constantly aware of where your opponent is, how far away they are, whether or not it's time to throw this move out or not. But when you don't have to do that on Ryu or Nash, the match changes drastically.
Okay. Well, let's have a look here then. Jumping around a lot here. Just floating in the air mostly. Back into his ground pressure cycles. No cross-ups this time. Very close to it, but no actual cross-ups. Don't think that's a matter of what Dwolf is doing, however. Demon losing his own chunk of health. Keeping in the cycle, Dwolf has managed to jab him out of it a little bit with a little bit of good timing. But he gets right back into it. Ignores the flash chop and all variation, just keeps it up. Lots of jumping.
Yes,
And
because
all of it
that's the
landing.
key to what I'm talking about. He recognized, okay, I keep jumping and I keep getting anti-aired, but what are you anti-airing me with?
Ah, I see. Is that what it is?
Don't have time for this.
And that's what made this last round so important.
Alright, well let's have a look at that then. Not specifically seeing what Dwolf is trying to hit, although it seems at this point Dwolf is just blocking them for the most part. Dropkick out of air, but only one so far. Yeah, he's always using the jabs, huh?
So basically, Necklord sees no reason to not jump. Like, he just continues because he's like, ooh, yeah, occasionally you hurt me, but eventually you're going to mess this up. And I get to practice my timing, I get to space myself. Eventually I'm going to get this right. And since I already won a round, I don't really care. It's important to recognize when your opponent is just testing you. Some people do the same thing over and over, not because it's the only thing they know how to do, but because your response to it isn't that strong.
Sure.
Because if you recognize that your opponent keeps on doing the same thing, but they're also not dying, then something's probably wrong there, isn't it?
Yeah, probably. You need to deal with that. So,
The upcoming
Dawson?
Dalsim matches are casuals, but I figured it was important to look at this because while they did interrupt it, they also had a particular outcome that is interesting to look at, even considering the level of the Dalsim. So let's move on to that.
Okay.
And we're looking specifically now at, again, a buoyancy question. The question being, can a Dalsim player get high in ranks? Notice that they have 665 LP, so they don't have much LP. But
Sure,
this
level
is
15.
Dalsim is probably not necessarily low tier, because a lot of people will consider Dalsim to be solidly mid tier right now. But I'm not really getting into tier questions at the moment. This game is too complicated for that in most places. The question is, Does 65 points on Dalsim mean the same thing that it does on Ken?
That is
And
an
the answer
interesting
is
question.
flatly no.
Yes. Especially because Ken, everyone is going to know how to counter because they face 3 of them every time they go online, at very least. Even if they
But
only go
at the
online
same
for one
time,
match.
a Dalsim player, in order to play the level of defensive skill to play Dalsim and win, they probably have gone through so much more just to get to the same spot as the 665 can.
Yes, definitely. It's also easier to learn offense than it is to learn defense in this game to some degree. At least at the lower levels.
So you can see this almost immaculate play from our Dalsim player, whose name I will not really be bothering with.
Yes, he definitely does seem to be controlled and understanding to some degree what he's doing. It doesn't seem like he's being random or spamming or anything like that. He's definitely been in the game, despite his levels and rank.
Well, remember that levels only go up if you actually win matches, technically.
Ah, so he
So-
could have a great deal of losing experience as well. And he simply may not have bothered with survival or anything, as I see he's in his default costume as well.
Now, this isn't to say that these particular Dalsim setups or movements are very difficult in themselves, but not dying while you do them can be rather hard.
Yes.
So in the case of Dalsim, character buoyancy means that you shouldn't judge a Dalsim player, and the next match is obviously going to be that one. You shouldn't judge a Dalsim player specifically by the amount of LP they have, because, flatly, it takes longer for a good Dalsim to get more points. You can't necessarily say that they have points specifically from Dalsim, but, and let's move on to that while I continue. You can't specifically say, well, they're Dalsim but they have low points, so that doesn't mean anything, they're probably good. But you definitely shouldn't say, oh, they're only 665 points. You have to pay very close attention to what character a person is playing before you go, their LP means this particular thing.
Indeed. Because there are a lot of variables that indicate one's sort of natural positions with a character in rank.
Interestingly, in Gold, all the Ryu that are actually really good have managed to get out of the army. So Gold Ryu tend to be vastly better than Bronze Army Ryu.
Sure. So now we have some fireball zoning from the Dalsim teleport mix-up. Taking a lot of damage off attempted slides there. Backing off and gets that teleport mix-up basically every time. DeWolf is not ready for blocking that. Interesting stun attack there. Definitely something that he's had to work out.
But at that point, it's not really different from learning a Ken combo. It's this part that I found interesting. Not exactly how far away he teleports at the beginning of the round. And furthermore, he does a teleport mix-up that specifically goes into throw. It's not like he whiffs something else and then does throw. He's expecting his opponent to have countered his regular mix-up by now. It didn't happen.
And so he has the backup ready. Ouch. Not a very damaging CA though.
It depends on what you're looking at. Remember, Alice's health is now 1025, and that was at the scaling point of the game.
That's true. I do admit I am used to Karine, Cammy, Ibuki, not exactly high health characters.
Yes, the Glass Cannon Brigade is a much more fitting test for how much a move is really doing.
Yes.
But we're skipping over that Guile, skipping over the Ed, skipping over the Ken. We're going all the way up. I wanted to take a look at the eds, but based on the timing we have left, I don't think I'm actually going to look at those. Because I don't
Okay.
have a specific read on how high or low ed goes, and I know that the wolf doesn't have a whole ton of ed experience.
All
I
right. Are
can
we
point out
taking a?
that it's
Are we taking a
important
look
that
at
he
the?
won against the ones there, and it didn't seem to be particularly difficult,
All
so
right.
I'm
We're
not going
skipping
through
over the
those.
Ken
I'm
and
going back
Nash
to...
as well.
Yes, we're skipping over the
All
Ken, the
right.
Nash, the Eds above it,
We have
and then
a
we're getting into your area.
Karines.
So let's move on to this Mexican Karin.
Okay then. And begin. Do not actually stop and look at her level, although I guess I will see it right here now. Ooh, black.
Yes,
So this
the
is
black
level
Karin color
29
is very
Karine.
popular. Mhm.
Played for about as
So,
long as me, although admittedly has gotten a little higher.
well, you'll actually be able to see the difference in the play between you and them that makes that possible.
Ah, well that will be interesting to watch.
Okay.
So let's have a look.
Round one. Fight.
Walking backwards, some Mayokan approach space control here. Staying out, looking for the whiffs to punish. Poking with Mayokan mainly, defensive, neutral jumps.
Well, you'll know
Gets
that
him into a
after
bit of
their
a cycle
defensive
here.
neutral jump works, they have a specific setup for that.
Okay.
And that's actually a really important part of Karin's game at this level. It's probably one of the heavier things separating your ability to play her from this person's.
I see. Just the the setups in certain situations, and ability to continue from them.
Mm-hmm.
All right. That does make
There's
sense.
also the tendency to walk forward after that particular... After their stand medium kick, the one that follows the crouch medium punch, they walk forward and normally they take the hit.
That's interesting. I would normally perceive that as failure or negative to some degree, at least. But I suppose it gets them lots of advancement. Or what is it coming out of there?
Yeah.
Just positioning.
Overall, the position that she gets into when she does that, if you think of it as a very, very delayed frame trap, there are a lot of people that respond to you advancing on them. They have to take a little time to recognize that they could hit a button. Now, by the time
Sure.
they've recognized that they could hit a button, if
It may be
Karin
too
has
late.
hit the button herself, she will get a full combo.
Okay.
So the second match, let's move on to the second match, of course.
Okay.
The flow that she has, therefore, is to simply hit with stand medium kick, and against a defensive opponent, walk forward, and I'm willing to bet they were going for either stand light kick or stand medium punch, because going for the throw at that point would generally not work on most people at this level because they've seen you walk forward for too long. So
Sure.
they're either going to try to throw you or tech the throw. If their timing is off, you still win if you press stand medium punch.
Okay.
Sure.
Let's rumble.
I mean, I think it is a 5-frame button, so
Fight.
it does not take much, and its range is relatively good. In my long list of buttons that I underestimate the ranges of. Not a very good punish from DeWolf on the minus 15 heavy Mujin. Following that medium kick with a Mayokan.
Right, because they actually did a different combo there. They did crouch medium into stand medium, and at that point they know, okay, I can definitely do this. That is the other thing that made it different. I did not even know she could safely do that at that range, but it appears that she does get that entire thing off jump-ins. I suppose that I don't see it much in
Of which
high-level
one?
play because normally you go crouch medium punch into crouch medium kick.
Yes, that's my
This player does
typical.
not do that. I mean, they were doing a little bit of it before, but what they actually do is very different. And I actually didn't know that it was possible to do that regularly because very few people do it. This is because they had time to probably perfect the ability to do Tenko from that.
From the stand medium punch, you mean, or?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's actually something I've tried to get at a little bit, but found very, very difficult relative to the crouching one, simply because I have to do a lot more with this pad in order to get there.
But the situation that creates is the superior version of what you're using now, which means that they have effectively said, I'm going to hit confirm my own stand medium punch, having already hit with the crouching one so they know whether or not to do it.
Right.
And if they mess it up, they go into Seppo, which means that probably they weren't getting hit either way. So they actually have a flatly superior pressure strain, at least against certain people.
Yes, the reason
well
actually that I wanted to learn that was to allow for the easier hit confirm there, without necessarily as much pushback, and just a safer button for the option, given that crouch medium is -4. I had not considered the fact that I could cancel those. Alright, so -1 Ryu. Are we going to go with the Colleen then, to compare to your earlier matches?
Yes, we are. And you'll note that this Colleen has a higher level than I do. So let's move on to that.
Okay. I had not thought of using the canceling into the Seppo either way, on negative confirm as well, to simply just not get hit or dodge certain things. That is definitely a good answer, because I've seen certain videos of some impressive Seppo dodges even without the EX, but not something that I've learned myself yet. So, one more thing for the list, I suppose.
If someone decides to hit a longer button after your stand medium punch, there's a good chance you'll get through it. You can do similar things with Bison's Dash.
Interesting. Well, I'm going to have to experiment with that at some point then. In any case, here we have Colleen. I believe you've not watched this one yet, so...
No, I have not.
Alright. Lots of walk back, forcing him to come to her this time around. Possibly looking for a parry option on the approaches, but Flash Chop is very quick. You can't parry that on reaction.
You can, but only if you have meter. And they do not have meter yet.
Sure, okay. Well, there we go. Now they have... they do not have meter yet, so... Continuing along the way. Definitely ready for the jump in, ready to punish him severely with a counter for that. Cannot jump in on Colleen if she's remotely expecting it, and she does seem to be requesting it almost.
Now, part of the problem with this was simply probably holdover from the matches with me where he felt head crush is just not going to work. This is actually a Colleen against who it probably would have.
I see. Let's see here. It would certainly give him a way in against her when she's doing some of her full screen waiting. Or at least the positions where she's so much waiting for him to come in with the jump in that her counter would get grabbed instead, simply because she's not ready for it. So yes. Now they are into the closer game. Failed command throw. Sweeps. Air throw, interestingly enough. Counter throw V-trigger. Still not doing much here. DeWolf now backing off on his own a little bit. Jump-ins from Colleen. DeWolf playing very cautious. Goes for an opening and gets countered, however. Colleen not whiffing many counters, so she must have set that up or been ready for it.
Yes, it's relatively easy to set up that particular one. But it's not something you do on reaction, it's just, okay, I'm about that space, I should hit this button now. Because she does have a space at which it's very difficult to punish her B-skill. Getting into that space, that's the difficult part.
I see. Well, it seems to be working out for her. Now playing a very slow poking game between them. Unfortunately, DeWolf is very low, so he's not going to last very long at that. Punish with the Vanity Step Heavy Kick and ending the round. So
That is actually
Colleen takes
Blizzard
the
Heal
first.
for your future reference.
What is it called? Blizzard Heal.
Mhm.
Okay.
This is her overhead. She has the ability to do either her overhead or her sweep out of the medium vanity step, which is why I can play her because she's basically Blue Mary.
Uh-huh.
So the problem in that case was, again, related to buoyancy. If you play against a really specific type of Colleen and then face another one who the things you would have used on the person you normally play against don't work on that person. And the things you were avoiding using because the person you play against always stops them do work on that person. And you have to be able to
Yes.
recognize the difference. And this is why just telling someone this move doesn't work on Colleen is not necessarily the best thing you can do to improve their game. So we are now to the second of the Colleen matches where we can see that the Wolf definitely took at least a round. So let's move on to that.
Okay.
The key point here was what would have happened had he started to land the head crush on that Colleen. I don't know if he's about to do that and start to win and that's why he takes the round. I have, as I said, not watched this. But if he starts to land the head crush and she starts to shift, then he can say, okay, now I have played this match before. But then he would still be in the same feeling of, and now I don't know what to do. So
Right.
it can be demoralizing.
Yes, especially since he ended the matches with you with that same sort of nothing works feeling. He doesn't necessarily have a lot to fall back on. Anyway, jump in, opening gambit, not very good against the high counter. Blizzard heal, getting him right into the corner. What is the Fang Rush called for Colleen?
Parabellum?
Okay,
Yes, Parabellum.
I'm never gonna remember that, even though I might remember it. Alright then.
I think the general commentary community is cut between calling it knives and hands at this point.
Alright, well,
So
I'm sure no one
And
will
we can't-
complain too heavily if I call
I
it
don't
Fang
really
Rush.
think. I'm pretty sure they will complain, given that was a holdover from DiCaprio that no one else called her move either.
Fine. Whatever. Alright.
I'm sure that when we see enough Colleens, we'll know what the general thing is called. We should watch Wednesday Night Fights and hope that Via is still playing.
Well, that might be worth doing. In any case. And since it is Wednesday, may even be on later if they are streaming that sort of thing. But on to the task at hand, we have the CA finish here. Bit of a life lead here for Omega. About double. Taken off with the head crush, so he is getting that head crush now. Ooh, into a CA. This is going to be what takes him the round either way. Close to the end, gets the parry but not the field break. Solid crush counter and pushback. Unfortunately, the grab takes her out. I knew it was going to happen, but I did not know how.
That was simply a matter of mistimed Blizzard heal, though, so there is something to be said for that.
Alright. So it's not necessarily a real win, completely except by the reactions here. Oof. Vanity step. Definitely
there's one.
punishing all of those vanity step options here now. Full screen play a little bit. Spending some EX he did not need to, getting countered. Up close we have...
If I were to say anything to this Colleen player is that they build their V-meter so quickly that they could afford to just, like, randomly use it.
Aha. Very good there. Ah yes, and every V-skill counter is going to get them more of it, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And probably a decent amount. How much do you get off of that?
I think it's actually close to... Let's say that the V-trigger gauge is 3,000. I think you get, like, 500 for one.
Okay.
So about a sixth, probably.
Sure. Got it. Alright then.
Unfortunately, no hard punish on the CA.
And that brings us to the end. What is this win quote now? So what's your utopia like? Not that you'll ever get to see it if you can't move. Alright.
The main thing to note about that was, again, that the Colleen player isn't specifically particularly high in ranks despite being high-ish level. I didn't look into any of their stats either. We're skipping the Ryu that follow, and we're going
Okay.
up to the Abigail, actually.
Alright then. Ready and waiting.
But, yeah, I didn't actually know anything specific about that Colleen. All I saw was that their play level was high. Perhaps they had a lot of time, but they had enough time to raise Colleen to level 29. Either way, let's move on to the Abigail and
Okay.
get into one of the biggest problems that the Wolf will currently obviously have. He has no Abigail bot. His entire experience against Abigail is playing against me. The problem with Abigail relative to Alex is that unless you time a bunch of things really well, Abigail is flatly untouchable to Alex, because Abigail players don't need to worry about Alex's long range. They exceed it in almost every button. And they don't have to worry about Alex's pressure because they armor through almost all of it. And can easily do that on reaction for some at least.
I see, that does make a difficult solution for him, especially if his only opportunity to practice has been rare and probably given that taking a beat down. Alright, so here we have DeWolf is actually doing relatively well. Alex mostly going for what looks like is that a crouch jab or a crouch medium punch to keep him out with. His crouch moves seemed like they would hit high even. Now getting into jump in period. DeWolf's doing an excellent job of keeping him in the corner nonetheless. However, that armor is starting to show its face, and that's going to be a problem. Taking out an EX response. Completely reversing the situation, throwing DeWolf back into the corner and defeating him.
So now we're about to see this concept play out, because I haven't watched this match either, but I can tell what this Abigail is going to do now. It's like, okay, Nitro Charge time. The interesting thing is that according to the setup, he didn't actually win this, but I can see why that would have happened as well.
Alright then.
If you were
Nice
too
crush
focused
counter,
on
please.
that, this is what will be the problem you face.
Indeed, and DeWolf does appreciate his parries, which he is doing an excellent job of. Ooh, that CA though. If anti-air was ever a thing, it was Abigail's thing. However, DeWolf is now out of parry, so let's see how this goes.
It would have been much, much better if he'd had more practice or the ability to deal with Abigail bot, because he would have probably done the second parry of the sweep correctly and saved himself. But
I see. But
he
it does
did
work
manage
out
to
in
do
the
it.
end.
He does have, but he has to use up too much meter. So now they're even in meter again.
Yes, and that's going to be a
And-
problem as the next round comes about. Especially given the, just button interactions that they've been having, and the fact that Abigail can load up a lot of armor even without his meter. Although everyone calls him a monster truck, he is possibly more of an armored car. Okay. Breaks the armor with a very fast EX flash chop. Definitely getting outranged, however. Caught in the throw. Yeah, he really needs the Abigail bot or a little bit more practice here because he's just not getting his opportunities.
And I'd say that one of the bigger things that made it obvious is that this match didn't even have to go this way. The Abigail player could have simply used their meter for EX Abigail Punch because they weren't using it for anything else. There was no specific reason for them to not use it, even though that move is not actually that damaging.
Which one was
there
it?
mostly for Abigail's protection. The Abigail Punch is able to block at least one attack and tends to respond quickly enough.
Uh-huh. So that would have been a relatively decent defensive, well, not quite parry, but similar concept.
It works really well against single hit jump-ins. Any character that can only hit once with their jump-in attack and has no options for changing that up suffers quite heavily against it. The reason it's not normally a problem, and you will see it in the next match, which is obviously just above it, the reason it's not normally a problem is that the move is not very damaging to most people, and it doesn't have much good after knockdowns. So, moving on to that match,
Okay.
we're going to see more of that I'm willing to bet, and if they never use it, then I'm really interested to figure out what they end up using their meter for, because another good way to test or to understand the strength of an opponent you're facing is, did it really feel or look as if they were pressed for meter at any time? Or did they manage to use their super well?
Sure. Alright then. That's horrible.
Also, battle costume is the best.
This is a pretty good one. Alright, as we have it, Abigail definitely making use of his range and armor to really get the drop on Wolf here. It can be very hard. You definitely need the Abigail bot, if only just to get used to where his armor timings are on some of his advancing moves. Getting hurt by those. Very nice head crush there, the Abigail staying too far back.
Actually, the problem was that they went for parry, and it wasn't... I presume they were expecting Stampede.
I see.
So...
Alright then.
And we've seen no use of meter, no more push than just armoring through everything.
Yes, and he hasn't needed any more than that either. Very nice opening gambit there. It appears to evade everything it wouldn't armor or hit. Right into the corner. And into those throws. Very, very damaging. Even though he manages to put him back out of the corner, a single throw is going to put him back into trouble. No V skill, no V trigger out for parry. Now maybe we'll have a better chance, but jumping over it in advance, correct response from Abigail, results in a loss for DeWolf, who possibly could have pulled his meter a little sooner.
So overall, there's not a particular way of saying this person is especially good with their Abigail or not, but they have good fundamentals, and clearly this will keep them afloat at this level even if they continue to play Abigail properly. Also, because the game, I think, does have at least some adjustment in systems relative to matching you up if your character level is lower. I'm not absolutely sure of this, but I have a strong belief on it based on certain things that I've seen in experience. We are in fact looking at the Chun-Li matches that follow.
Okay then.
And both your recent work and my experience will probably cover most of this.
Mm.
So let's start that up.
Okay.
While the problem with the having good fundamentals aspect of keeping yourself afloat is that that's all it generally does. You have to stay there a little while and try to build up as much tech as possible.
Yes.
And this becomes difficult when your opponents start to vary a lot. So it's actually harder to stay there when you are playing a Shoto character. If you are fairly good in your fundamentals, but are playing Ryu or Ken or sometimes Akuma,
Everyone will have the counterattack.
Yes, so you end up slowly drifting down and having to come up with more tech than other people, and your fundamentals have to be even better.
Sure, because the other people can rely on the other Shotos and their Shoto-specific tech to bring them up just by density. Whereas you have to manage to master, well, both that matchup and everyone else who's going to be facing you.
It's generally a little easier for Akuma, but not if you're the sort of Akuma who makes mistakes or doesn't manage to finish their combos.
Alright, this Chun-Li does not appear to be quite prepared for his ranges. He's definitely getting a lot of space control relative to where she wants to be from what I can see here. Not letting her get away with anything. No Senenshus. Even the Hake was a trade there. Trying a Kikoken, but it does get her in for the head stomp, interestingly.
I think the bigger problem with this particular style is that they aren't pushing on the light spinning bird kick as a whiff punish, presumably because Alex does have some decent responses to that, but you should probably test it out against him. However, you will note that Chun-Li is one of those characters where you really can't specifically tell. There it is.
Yes, and he does manage to throw out of it, so I'm sure that was a little bit discouraging in terms of continuing to do that often.
This is true, but
However,
what I mean is that Chun-Li is not a character who you can say, okay, the Chun-Li players at this level are X strong. Because there are two different ways to play her, similar to the fact that there's two different ways to play Ryu, and one of them floats to a different level than the other.
I see.
The
So
two
what are the two
styles
for...
of Chun-Li and Ryu.
What are
For
those two?
Chun-Li, you are basically, if you are able to put on pressure and your opponent doesn't have really good reactions, because her lightning legs is minus but not terribly minus relative to the range, and it's hard for a lot of people at lower levels to tell when it ends, she can become relatively hard to punish. When she hits with it, she's plus 3 or 4, so even if she only clips you with it, she's plus enough that she gets hit another button and you flatly don't in a lot of situations.
I see. I was not aware of that,
So
actually.
If you play Chun-Li using a lot of specials and relying on the fact that most people don't know how to punish you, you will float to the level where people have mastered most of their punishes, which is around, I'd say, mid-silver.
Okay. And if you're playing more so with normals, then you're going to not get nearly as high.
If you're playing more so with normals, in the current meta, where you tend to meet a lot of Shotos, you will end up getting beaten up because it's really easy to deal with Chun-Li pressure with EX Shoryuken. Because flatly, anything she does, especially if you were counting on that same sort of thing, whenever you do such a move, and let's move on to the next match and see if it actually changes. Whenever you do such a move and you hit with it, if you drop your combo and your opponent is mashing Shoryuken, then you're the one that takes all the damage. If you were the sort of person that said, okay, I am confident in this hit, and that my opponent is going to take their time and not try to waste their meter or whatever, I'm going for the next hit. That can be a problem for you because you're spending so much time hitting buttons that you're not ready for the idea that someone is just going to try to mash Shoryuken out of your stuff. But it's perfectly valid and flatly a good idea because if she's plus 4 but hits a slow-ish button, it doesn't even matter what button she hits. She's plus 4, but if it's not a combo, it doesn't matter.
Right, because of the invincibility involved. Alright.
So
well, as
this
for this
player
particular...
this particular player focuses and relies a lot more on the hitting of buttons, the spacing, the poking. They do the lightning leg loops occasionally, but you can see even where they use their meter, they spend a lot of time doing the crouch medium kick, using their meter on EXP poking.
Sure.
They're focusing on creating plus situations for themselves. So if they face Alex, it's probably more effective. If they face Akuma and Ken, they're probably getting bodied.
Sure. Okay. Simply because they do have the mashing option for their DPs, EX DPs, and can cause a lot of trouble that way. Whereas Alex has none of this, he just has a little bit of range. And Chun-Li has some decent range on some of her things.
Alex's range also helps against her, but you have to be more on point with understanding when her moves end, otherwise you'll just get blocked.
Sure. Yes, and that can be somewhat unintuitive in certain cases. Dwarf, however, does seem to be taking her out here. Strong rounds there, and it is the end of this Chun-Li, unfortunately, it seems.
Well, actually, since they won the first one, we get to look at one more.
Oh, do we? Well, good then. Let's have a look at that in that case.
So, the main problem that you encounter right there is that when Chun-Li does certain moves in V-Trigger, they are decently different enough that when you are pushing forward on people and expect one thing to happen, a different thing happens. But I don't think that that was probably the reason why they fall in the next match, so let's move on to that and see why
Okay.
it actually goes. If you aren't good at spacing out to do with punishes with her V skill, you don't tend to build up that much V meter against characters that aren't very buttonsy. She can get a lot of V meter off countering people with her long range crush counter, for example. It
Sure.
might not get you very far in neutral, but V meter is V meter.
Mm-hmm.
And clipping people with Rankyaku, now that they changed it, every hit after that, or every jump in attack that you use from it now gives you V meter instead. So it's
Which can get you
relatively difficult
somewhere.
to stop her from getting... It's really difficult to stop her from getting her V trigger at a point where it's still usable.
Sure. Alright then. Especially since it is only a 2-bar option here. Alright, we got some aerial pressure from DeWolf. Managing to keep her out relatively well. She started trying to adapt with jump-ins, or air-to-airs more so. Not quite got the timing out for it yet. Head crush. Trying to come in low, but gets hit by another one of his stomp aerial attacks. Putting him into the throw loop, however. Managed to get out of it and right back in. Looks like she can continue that for free on him, more or less, however this C8 will take it.
And definitely so buttonsy that it doesn't occur to this player to just randomly ES legs, for example.
Yes. Lots of dash, lots of buttons all over. I think that's the first legs I've seen in a while, too, even. Curious if Rankaku is actually apparently anti-air possibly at that exact range. But Rankaku legs may not be in this person's immediate arsenal given their styles.
Mm-hmm.
Jump over allows her to put him back into the throw loop. Okay, hits. Looking for an opportunity for another one of those EXK tokens to get her up. Very close, anything will take it. Wolf starting to make his comeback, but running out of V meter takes a loss and a Senenshu.
So I would say that the key problem he faces in this match is that he actually is trying to build up meter, but against Buttonsy Chun-Li you probably want to just use your V reversal to get her back off so that you don't have to worry about any of this. Because you can get easily caught in after imagey loops and then just surprised at some point where you think, okay, it's time to do this.
Sure, and then half your life is gone suddenly.
Well, unfortunately for Chun-Li players, half your life is gone is not really a thing we get to say, but...
Well, I suppose.
It certainly is stressful enough that it could become difficult for him to get through anything.
Mm-hmm.
But because they aren't often ready with the ES Bird and have been saving a lot of power for this,
Very nice CA cancel right there.
this is currently the suggested style of play if you go on most forums, but it's a very hard style of play to be doing at lower levels because it's not really successful, as I said. So if you are ready to take on the grind of going, okay, I'm eventually going to get high up, sure, but it's easy for certain types of people to get discouraged. On
I
the
have
other
no
hand,
idea what
one
just
could
happened.
argue that
Okay.
you could argue that most of those sorts of people don't play Chun-Li, so maybe it's not so terrible.
Well then.
Okay,
Who will
so
we be
given
watching
that-
next, or is it about time to call it a day?
Not quite. We do have one or
Okay.
two more things to look at. Specifically, there is, I believe, a Kami higher up after we skip through another fairly large Shoto army.
So I see it.
And that brings us very close to the end. What was interesting about this Kami is I have to ask now, And I hope that we actually can get a direct answer from him before we go into this, or maybe we could go up and then end on the Cammy. Let's try that, because I need to find out, since I know that he's watching, Nikari the Wolf, is this Cammy laggy? Because I can't see why you would play them 3 times if they were, but in the meantime, let's us go up to the Nash player above that,
Okay.
and
Tiger Stripes.
let's move on to that match. Yes.
Okay.
But yes, he can let us know whether or not that Cammy was, to his recollection, laggy, and since it's among the most recent matches that he's played, I'm going to hope that he can flatly remember that. Because I couldn't see why you'd play them so many times if they were, but we've done similar things.
He
Okay,
remembers
then, that is
no
good
lag
to know.
whatsoever, it seems. So,
Okay.
okay then. We'll get a chance to look at that soon.
Now we have a level 33 Nash here. And Nash also, now, as I said, has trouble in terms of buoyancy. Getting to high levels with Nash takes a lot more understanding. Once you break through the plateau, you tend to skyrocket up past most people, because Nash's tools, once you have them, other people's counters to them aren't really that strong. But this is the most basic game you could be playing, for example. It's just poke, zone, poke, zone.
Sure.
The really
Very simple
spectacular
loop here.
Nash stuff. Really spectacular Nash stuff is not usually developed for quite a while, and developing it tends to get you stuck at almost exactly this level, which is partly why,
Interesting.
while you know you've mentioned sometimes that certain people that you talk to with different rank points than you encounter a entirely different set of people than you. Buoyancy is the reason this happens. Once you have floated your way out of the Shoto army, well, if you could ever say that that truly happens, each 400 or so points has a different character that ends up floating at that level and that you see more of.
Not a very wide band,
So-
actually, relatively.
No, not really. So, for example, Just Vine will meet lots more Nash than you.
Mm-hmm.
I think at your current points you will generally meet nearly none.
Yes, that is consistent with my experiences. I meet one occasionally, but really not very often overall.
And chances are that they probably beat you on their way up to where they float at. Not specifically because they're better than you per se, but because the things you need to learn to do with Nash to get through most people and float at around 2100, 1900 are relatively easier to learn than the sort of things you need to learn with Karin.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Karin is a level above Nash. Most people, once they get decently good at Karin, float above that point.
I
They
see.
float in the 2400 range and so on.
Back near that other Karin we
So-
were looking at before.
Yeah, you'll see a lot more of them around there, and to the point where it can get kind of annoying because of the number of them you run into.
I see. That'll be an interesting period for mirror matches for me then.
Presumably. But based on all that, I have been watching this match, and again, I don't actually see too much reason to continue with it unless requested, because it's basically a Nash at the float level of Nash doing float level Nash things. They're probably going to gain something out of it, but this is mostly just, okay, I'm backdashing, okay, I'm not backdashing. And the Wolf has enough experience with punishing Nash in stuff that he's able to take this round on his usual parry skills.
Alright then. So in that case we can go back to that Cammy and have a look at her.
Yes, we'll probably close out with that. Cammy players are a very strange bunch in that Rushdown Cammy floats at a different level than Footsie's Cammy, and people who know both don't even tend to stay floating at all. They just head right on up to some point that I've never personally seen, probably somewhere in around 3700 or something.
Alright.
Because I see them when I start getting up there, or when I start getting matched there, because the game thinks I should punch above my weight for some reason.
Alright. What flag is this? I can't see it very well from here.
I don't actually remember, but I don't think it's too relevant. Let's just go on and watch
Alright.
it.
We have a 1700 point Cammy. Level 21. Loading.
So I'm really interested to figure this one out because once again, oh yeah, it was
China.
Chinese Cammy, and I was trying to
Okay.
think, how could you possibly have a good connection?
That is what I
But-
was wondering as well. So that was my first
but
assumption, but I was
remember
like, am I sure? Because that's halfway around the world. But alright
They
then.
could actually just have that flag and be somewhere else at the moment. Such
This
things
is
happen.
quite possible.
For those who I wish
Since the flags
But-
are unfortunately not geolocation, I would kind of appreciate if they were.
No, I would like them to more so have both.
Sure. I could see that, yes.
So here's
I
the
assume
question:
people would get
what is it that
confused and
this
complain.
Cammy does? Because, as I said, Rushdown Cammy gets stuck in like 800 to 1000,
Okay.
and Footsie's Cammy can after a long bit of effort to make sure they have enough meaties, for example, get up to around 3000-ish.
Uh-huh.
And then after that, they just disappear, as far as I can tell. Which is why I don't think I really think that. When was the last time the Omni Rabbit even saw one? He sees one every now and then.
On their way
But
up,
what we're seeing
presumably.
what we're seeing this here is what looks like Footsie's Cammy on their way up.
Uh-huh.
At least that's my guess so far, because they don't really dash in. They don't seem to do a bunch of hooligan stuff
Sure.
to get in. They're occasionally doing turn knuckle, but they don't seem to have a strong intention to hit with it.
Right. They would seem to basically be using it to move in and just harass him if he tries to come forward himself.
And the important thing to recognize is that Cammy is a character that must put pressure on you. So, Footsie's Cammy still has to take her advantages when she can, get up close to you,
Uh-huh.
hit a button, and hope that you don't block. And in this case, that was definitely the outcome.
Yes.
He didn't
Very little
block,
blocking from his
and
end.
that basically was the round.
Final round. Fight.
So you can expect
have-
that if you play Footsie's Cammy, you're going to float up to around 3000 once you've figured out most of what you're doing. And then you're going to hit a plateau there. And probably, hopefully not get too frustrated, but yes, this is blatantly Footsie's Cammy because
Yes,
they spend so much time
definitely.
walking back and forward.
Mhm.
And doing stuff like
And
that.
she's very deliberate. She's not poking a whole lot. She's definitely being very precise about the ranges she's doing things from and what she is doing in a way that is not the impression I get from most rushdown style camis.
Now, this isn't to say that you specifically need to learn footsies to get past the rushdown level. It's that your rushdown has to get so good, and so you have to learn every single one of Cammy's block strings and mix-ups to get out of the
Right.
1000 or so point of rushdown Cammy.
And, well, it can be nice. You can look at that thought and say, well, but Footsie's Cami does so much better. Well, technically, it's true, but it's really fundamentally not a matter of that. It's a matter of understanding and accepting that you have a particular style you want, and either if sure you could switch to Footsie's Cami, but then you would master Footsie's Cami and break through instead of mastering Rushdown Cami and breaking through. And really, you should accept being a slightly lower level and master the one you want to play, because being stuck with the wrong style of a character and going through all the work required to break through your float level is really, really an investment, and not one someone should make with something they're not having fun with.
True. So, let's move on to, this appears to be the second match, yes?
Yes, 2 of 3 apparently. Okay.
Okay, moving on, let's move on to that. So, this is important for everyone to understand for their character. I'm not planning to make a list that's within this stream. I might be able to, and we could put it up somewhere, but every character, I wouldn't say I have that knowledge for every character at the moment. I definitely know that for Laura, you float really high off of setups, and you get stuck really low if you start playing Footsie's Laura. Really low. It's super annoying. Not necessarily because she's a character who's terrible at footsies, but that her footsies are so unintuitive to the regular player that they're just switching to someone else and saying her footsies suck.
Aha.
But I'm pretty sure that Idom started off as this because his level of footsies relative to it, and Wolfrone is probably also similar. The way their footsies work, they give me the impression that they're footsie characters who managed to figure out Lara footsies early. The problem that this Cammy is facing now, however, is that Alex has better range. Flatly.
Yes. And that is troublesome.
Which is why I had to give you that entire specific lesson on how
Yes.
to deal with Alex's buttons. But
Indeed.
without that, there's no way to immediately look at, okay, this is the range I should do this at, this is the range I should do that at. And I'm hoping that part of this, since I'm pretty sure DeWolf was also involved in that stream directly and could hear, is looking like he's doing some of the stuff that he remembers from that.
Yes,
And it's putting the Cammy on edge.
I'm sure he was, because I believe you were actually teaching us both in that stream how to handle each other in incremental steps.
So while this is another, hey, I'm not blocking right now, sort of round. And the player is definitely trying to do other things. They don't know what to do after the crouch medium kick that he puts out.
Yes.
So they
and
just
so
end up
he
moving out of the
basically
way.
just gets it free at level 1.
Mhm.
Of course, he then has to deal with everything else that she's putting through. Simply because having the base matchup level that you need, it does not always give you a free pass.
On the other hand, it's partly because he knows that and was probably expecting them to counter in the way that was described.
Sure.
That he doesn't necessarily try to get a lot, because if you think about it,
Yes.
what he did is the exact response. He had V-trigger up. So he stuck out crouch medium kick and then went into sledgehammer. Now,
Uh-huh.
if he were to do that against you normally,
Yes, I would get my
and you hit crouch,
parry.
right, you'd get parried on the crouch heavy punch if you hit it.
Mm-hmm.
And since the Cammy doesn't really have another way in after that, you see the turnabout.
Sure, but in his case,
There you
she's
go.
just... Oh, very nice. Yep, that's exactly what happened. And he takes the round from it, actually.
So knowing just that piece of the puzzle allows that to happen. Even if they did figure out, oh, I'm supposed to hit this button.
Mhm.
It's unfortunate for them. It's like, no, this Alice has already learned how to deal with that too. They were just
Indeed.
not doing it before. Well, they technically were doing it before. They were expecting you to do this. So now that you've actually finally done it, you've gained no advantage.
So
And
it is.
it's really important to think about this when you're at your float level, because this is how people beat you when they have tech in advance. You don't do the thing they're expecting, but you don't do anything better either. You don't do something unexpectedly good.
Yes.
You just retreat.
Yeah, and that can be really, really troublesome and frustrating for people who are at that float level, and for me as well, because you can try all sorts of stuff, but as soon as you get to the right thing you're supposed to do, it's going to get countered, if not the first, then definitely the second time, and you're stuck wondering if it was even the right thing to begin with. So it can be very
it's really hard
difficult.
it's really hard on a lot of people emotionally. You have to have a lot of either understanding of fighting games or faith in yourself to just look at that and go, no, I'm pretty sure that's the right thing to do.
Yes, and well, we know where I stand on that point. So starting the next one now, actually, since I...
Yes, let's move on.
Hit the button
Final
already.
round, final match of the night. And again, based on that, this is part of the reason why we see in advance who's going to win. I'm going to presume that this more or less stayed in that realm of him being ready. Now, this is the most important part of understanding buoyancy. This Footsie's Cammy does not end up not floating higher because, oh, this is where they're going to get stopped. No. If you think about the two players here in terms of where their float levels are, DeWolf understands how to beat Footsie's Cammy that is learning by having received that lesson flatly.
Yes.
So, in this match, while this person is probably quite able to deal with a different Alex, if he has everything required to deal with them from a lesson that he had against you,
Uh-huh.
it's probably not going to go in their favor, not because they're doing the wrong thing.
Just they don't have enough
But
levels of it
because-
yet.
Yes, basically. Because we have flash shot, medium kick, wait, flash shot again, And you can see they're even trying to figure out something to do.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But in the end, it comes down to, okay, I managed to clip you, and your defense
Right.
on wake up is bad, so I managed to take it
They
away.
have their combos and a little bit of meaties, but all they can really do is continuations. They can't find the openings in the way that would be possible if they had all of the levels they needed for this. So it looks like they're getting their damage from punishes, from sometimes clips, and just a high strength stat more so than necessarily knowing precisely how to break through. And that is why
And
it is a float level barrier.
The other thing that happens here is that, as the Wolf pointed out, he actually makes quite a few mistakes in this match.
Hmm.
Presumably here where he starts realizing that they don't hit the crouch heavy punch, but then they jump, which is not a good idea overall, but he keeps on going back to what he normally did because he learned. This is actually a result of him learning on that day. He basically went, okay, well, they don't hit crouch heavy punch, and they're not ready for anything I seem to be doing, so I'll just keep on doing air stampede.
Sure.
So it doesn't hurt him. And this is a very important lesson to learn, that you can do things that don't hurt you, but the only reason they don't hurt you is because your opponent doesn't understand what's going on.
Uh-huh. Yes, those can be difficult to identify as well. That's why it's very important to watch your replays.
Or to have someone else do it. Someone who, especially if you have a friend who plays the character, ask them to watch your replays.
Yes, because their mindsets will be
well.
different. Yes, their mindsets will be different, their experiences will be different. They'll know the things you don't know. Their just basic patterns will be different. They'll be able to go, wait, no, why did you do that there? Far more easily than doing it for yourself, since you're very used to your own style, naturally.
And most importantly, they will do it for stuff that really worked out well for you. This is the thing you're least likely to do to yourself. You're least likely to look at a match, see a massive damage out of a great looking confirm and go, man, that was a terrible idea. Whereas your friend will tell you, you know that's not real, right? And then laugh because you got so lucky. I'm so glad that you did not lose that round off your own stupid decision.
Indeed.
And then you get to look at the match in a whole new light and realize that you are staying afloat at the level you're at, not necessarily because you are good. It's because your opponents don't know how to deal with you yet.
Indeed.
And everyone above you is just someone who learned how to deal with you, which means as soon as you start getting up into their levels, they're going to push you back down there until you learn how to deal with that. So,
Indeed.
to sum it up, when you feel as if you're not making any progress, that you just keep on winning and then losing again and then winning and then losing again, pay very careful attention to when you get into that space in Street Fighter. When you get into that space in any game that has a ranking system. When you realize, my LP, my ranking, whatever it is, it seems to be stuck at this one point. I can't seem to make progress. The reason is generally because people who are above you know how to deal with your stuff. People who you are beating don't know how to deal with your stuff. And occasionally someone is simply on their way passing through your level and does know how to deal with your stuff, and that person beats you. Those are the matches you need to pay the most attention to. Because when they're flatly better than you, you can't necessarily look at the match and say, oh, well, I had a lot of chances, but I didn't know what to do. Because you've been beaten up in some other way. It's when you see someone below you that you go, oh, well, this person's like 500 points below me, this should be easy. And then you get bodied. That's the moment you should go, oh, now there's something in here that probably I need to learn from.
Yes. And so that becomes the part where you need to ask your friends or just go through it again a couple times, maybe the next day, once you have a little bit of distance, even if you still know what you're thinking. And just
and so
look at it again.
That brings us to the end of Open Mic for tonight. Tune in tomorrow for a Play to Learn session, or, depending on what the discussions among the group happen tonight, I may cover something else in our How to Improve matchup settings if we decide that we should go into this particular topic more. I think I covered most of it, but feel free to send us any emails you have asking questions about it at our website, 2-mk.org. The contact form on that page will send emails through to the team, which we will be able to review. There may be some showing off of UrianBot. We're going to have to double check about streaming regarding that, as we know that most of us don't actually spend a lot of time collecting fight money or throw money at Capcom at the moment. Capcom has to earn that a little bit more. So characters are still only on particular accounts. Therefore, we will be seeing whether or not the Urian bot will be shown on tomorrow's stream, but it will be definitely available on Friday's stream. So with that, good night from Rillian's side.
And good night from Kansuki Dynasty. Have a good evening, everyone.